Hello again. I'm here with part 1 of my July wrap-up. I'm going to be starting with my sci-fi fantasy collection and also one miscellaneous poetry book. So these are the books I'm going to be talking about in this video. So let's just get into the video. The first book I'm going to talk about, or actually two books. It's the Iliad and the Odyssey by Homer. I've actually never read these books, and I decided, since they are classic mythology fiction to read, that I would read them. For me, it was tough getting through the Iliad because there were a lot of different characters, a lot of different things going on, a lot of segues into other areas, and it was kind of hard for me to follow, honestly. I still think, obviously, it's a great book. It's definitely a classic, and I did watch on YouTube some videos that talked about each book in the Iliad and explained the story, and I actually kind of like that. And I feel like if I ever did read this again, I would probably want to watch those videos and then reread it so I could get the gist more of what was going on, because it just so many different subplots and stories in the Iliad just made it hard for me to really enjoy it as much as I could have. So I kind of had trouble with the Iliad. So I'm going to reserve my judgment on the book until I actually reread it again at some point and actually able to dive into it and understand it more. I mean, for me, I just had trouble. The Odyssey, though, I actually really did enjoy. The Odyssey is a lot more linear story. It doesn't have a lot of different things going on like the Iliad, and I could definitely follow it a lot easier and did really enjoy it. It made me realize that I definitely do want to revisit the Iliad again, since I did like the Odyssey so much. I do plan on rereading this at a later point and trying to get into it more often, but for me, it was just kind of tough to get into Iliad, but Odyssey I did really enjoy. So that's my review of Iliad and Odyssey. Next book I'm going to talk about is Piers Anthony's Fractal Mode. This is the second in the Mode series of books by Piers Anthony. I wasn't a huge fan of the first book. After rereading it, I did remember as a child reading the book and really enjoying it, but there are a lot of problematic elements in the first book. But I decided to try again with the second book and keep going, and sadly I am not going to continue this series. I found even more problematic elements with Fractal Mode. If you don't know what the story is about this person from another reality who has a power where he gives joy to his subjects, literally makes them feel joy. It's a power that he uses, and it drains him. So he marries to use his wife's joy to help him feed the joy to the citizens. And of course, that doesn't last long, and then he winds up divorcing the woman and having multiple wives, and that's what this job entails. He decides that if he could find somebody from another realm, another reality, that person can be a person he could be with forever and still continue to share joy with his subjects. And there are a lot of problematic elements in the first book, and the second book just kind of upped the problematic elements for me. I'm not going to give it away too much, but there is rape and suicide and some pretty dark things in this book, and I don't really feel like they were done really well. I did not like the main character at all in the second book. I actually start despising him by the middle of this book, and sadly this was a big disappointment for me. And like I said, I won't be continuing with the series. That is Piers Anthony's Fractal Mode. Next book I read was Red Sister. This is the first of a series. I've never read this author Mark Lawrence before. I know this has gotten hyped on BookTube, and this is about a woman who gets taken in by these sisters and gets trained by them. It's kind of like an assassin type of thing. I just really couldn't get into it that much. I mean, I don't think it's a bad book. I definitely would give it maybe a 3.5. I think it's an okay book, and it's one of these books where I'm kind of debating whether I would continue or not. I don't know. If I found it cheap, maybe I would pick up the second book in this series. I don't know. It's not bad. It's not great. It's just, I don't think it's for me. I don't think it's something that I personally enjoyed that much. There's not much else I can say about it. I know a lot of people have enjoyed this book, and there are parts of the book that I did enjoy, but overall, it just didn't catch my fancy. It's just not a world, especially a fantasy world, that I really could get into as much. And that is Red Sister. Speaking of another science fiction book, fantasy book, this is New York 2140. I did look forward to reading this book. This is a very big book, as you can tell, and this is the first time I actually read anything by Kim Stanley Robinson. I really liked the way he described settings in this book. I thought the concept of this story is basically a ecological disaster as far as global warming affecting New York, and New York is pretty much a good chunk of Manhattan is submerged. And the author does a really good job at explaining what happened, explaining the political system, explaining the different classes and different ways that New York is actually surviving in this time. But sadly, I didn't get into the actual story of the characters that much. I really love the setting, I really love the descriptions, and that's why I'm kind of torn about this book, because I really did like parts of this book, the settings and the descriptions, like I said, but the actual story between the different characters that were in this book, I felt like was a little weak. I really couldn't connect to the characters as much. I definitely connected to the setting, I definitely connected to the concept of politics and money and corporations, and I did get into a lot of that, but the actual characters just weren't strong enough for me to really sink my teeth into this book. And especially a book of this size, you really have to be invested in the characters, and I just wasn't. So to be honest with you, I might try this author again, because I really did like his descriptions and I really liked the way he painted a world. I just felt like the story behind this world was a little weak. So that's my review for New York 2140. Now I'm going to talk about two books that I really loved reading this month. First one isn't sci-fi, isn't fantasy, but I decided to stick it in here anyway. And this is Love Her Wild by Atticus. This is a book of poetry, and I really enjoyed these poems. I really was moved by a bunch of these poems that he had in here. Here's one. I aspire to be an old man with an old wife, laughing at old jokes from a wild youth. I really enjoyed that one. Here's another one. Boys, learn too late that being the man is not the same as being a man. And this is another one that I really liked. If I had all the treasure in the world, I would follow my dreams, play with my children, and spend time with my wife. No, said the old man. If you followed your dreams, played with your children, and spent time with your wife, you would have all the treasures in the world. So those are just a few poems that I liked in this collection. This is my first poetry collection that I picked up, and I really did enjoy it. So that is Love Her Wild. And the last book I'm going to talk about here is Vicious by V.E. Schwab. Oh my god, I love this book. I definitely, V.E. Schwab now is one of my favorite authors from reading the Darker Shade of Magic series and now reading this. I definitely am going to have to pick up everything she's written. I've already pre-ordered 2 books that are coming out this month. I am definitely going to pick up the sequel to this when it comes out. Probably will pick up, the YA stuff that she's written as well, because I am looking forward to just diving into this writer's books, because so far I haven't had a single miss with all of the books that I've read by her. This is a superhero story, pretty much, about 2 people who look to gain superpowers. They call them extraordinaries in this book, and they kind of do it in a Flatliners kind of way, kind of a Beyond and Back type of way. And you see so much darkness in this book. There's so much darkness, there's so much intrigue, and just this kind of battle between these 2 people that it's just really fun to read. It was a great read, and I really enjoyed it. That is Vicious by V.E. Schwab. And those were all the books. Thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.